Aside from the thrill of kicking off our postseason, today we'll also be talking about the Dodgers front office fixing mostly everything in baseball before making one of the dumbest moves of all time, a Sandy Koufax record that was finally just beaten this past postseason, and combating a pitcher that talks to his balls by fighting crazy with crazy, and much, much more. Dump out your kid's lunch and take some deep cleansing breaths into a paper bag. The Dugs have uploaded a new video. Welcome back to the Dugs. Everything we do is an excuse to tell a lot of baseball stories and a lot of jokes, and if that sounds interesting to you, stay in the know and help us grow with a shiny free subscription to our channel. There's a lot of standalone content in this video, but if you'd like to start from the beginning of this tournament, the Season 2 playlist is dropping in. Otherwise, it's playoff time. Both the Tucson Too Soons and the Pittsburgh Crawfords emerged from the group stage with a 4-2 record, and we're expecting a great series out of them. All the Crawfords' Leroy Matlock did last time he hit the mound was set a Dugs record by throwing 17 strikeouts, but he's got a tall task ahead of him today as he takes on the tourney's home run leader in Josh Hamilton and an RBI leader in Tony Conigliaro, who has 8. Those 8 RBIs were good enough for a share of the lead, but he was tied with 3 others. 2 of those others are on the Crawfords in Oscar Charleston and Rap Dixon, but enough postulating. Let's play the feud. Leroy Matlock is on the mound for the Crawfords, and does this look familiar? Kurt Flood leads off and is down swinging. Tony Conigliaro is looking, and Jackie Robinson, looks like Johnny's pulled a fast one on you as that's a 2-out double, and this is Josh Hamilton following him with a clutch 2-out single, and that brings Jackie home. So that stakes the Too Soons to the early lead. With Sandy Koufax on the other side, it's no surprise runs for either team are at a premium. It's still 1-0 in the top of the 4th, and realizing the potential for a low score, here's Koufax trying to advance the runners with a sac bunt, but an excellent play by first baseman Chester Williams gets the lead man at third, which is good enough to keep the lead at 1. 1 inning later, however, Josh Hamilton thinks your small ball is cute, but perhaps he can interest you in a long one instead. He makes it 2-0 with a solo shot, and since he seems to be providing all of the offense, I guess it's time once again for my favorite game. Find some Josh Hamilton anecdote that doesn't depress and make all of our viewers uncomfortable. Josh is noteworthy in that he was a huge boon from the Rule 5 draft. He was selected by the Cubs in 2006 and immediately traded to the Reds for $100,000. It's the large-scale human equivalent of finding a 20 on the ground. As noteworthy as that pick was, it likely doesn't top the list. Did you know that 3 future Hall of Famers were Rule 5 selections? I wouldn't lie to you, baby. Christy Mathewson was selected by the Reds, Hack Wilson was selected by the Cubs, and Roberto Clemente was selected by the Pirates. The Roberto Clemente signing was especially surprising. Rabbit hole time. He was initially drafted by the Brooklyn Dodgers GM Branch Rickey, who's a guy that's left quite an impression on Major League Baseball. You see this logo? I for one think it's hideous, but I'm sure there are many out there that disagree with me. They're wrong, but they all have Mr. Rickey to thank for it. Well, him, and also a church and the Schmidt family. Rickey, who was affiliated with the Cardinals, was speaking at his church one day when a cardboard arrangement made by Allie Mae Schmidt caught his eye that featured 2 cardinals perched on a branch. Not the person branch, the stick branch. Branch the person loved it and enlisted the help of Allie Mae Schmidt's father, who was a graphic designer, to help him flesh that out into a logo, and that served as the origin story for a hugely popular logo for the worst team in the major leagues. From 1917 to 1919, he played a part in keeping Ty Cobb and Christy Mathewson alive during World War I as he commanded a unit containing both players. He's attributed with creating the farm system. Later in his career, he moved over to the Dodgers after his friend Larry McPhail went off to fight in World War II. Larry's an interesting guy in his own right. Chances are decent you recognize his last name. His son Lee McPhail GM'd the Yankees and Orioles and also served as the president of the American League. His other son, Bill McPhail, was the president of CBS and CNN Sports. His grandson was Andy McPhail, who GM'd the Twins and the Cubs. His great-grandson Lee McPhail is currently a scout for the Mets, and great-grandson Drew McPhail works for the Dodgers front office. I'm not going to say that nepotism is in play here, but I had a second half of that sentence, but it seems to have gotten away from me. Anyhow, Branch Rickey moves over to the Dodgers when Larry went off to fight the Nazis and made several things we take for granted now the norm, like batting cages, batting helmets, and pitching machines. It also sounds like he was all up in sabermetrics before Bill James was even born, hiring an analyst that provided data supporting the importance of platoons and on-base percentage over batting average. The big one he's known for is signing Jackie Robinson, a Tucson too soon, and breaking baseball's color barrier. But big whoop to all that, he also let Roberto Clemente go in the Rule 5 draft. The Dodgers only had 2 years to figure out what they wanted to do with him, as the rules back then were a little bit different. One of the conditions that made you eligible for the Rule 5 draft was that if you were given a signing bonus over $4K, you had to be on the team's big league roster for 2 years, else you became eligible. Well, Roberto had signed a $10,000 bonus, and so obviously the Dodgers liked him quite a bit. They just didn't like him enough to put him on the team. There are a few theories as to why this happened, but my favorite is that once they decided they couldn't work him into their already strong starting lineup, allowing him to go to Pittsburgh, who had the first pick in the Rule 5 draft, would keep him out of the Giants' hands. Who cares if he goes to the Pirates? They suck. Well, Clemente led those Pittsburgh Pirates to World Series wins in 1960 and 1971, and while the Dodgers were also elite at this time, can you imagine how good they would have been if they also had Clemente? Back to the game. We're still at 2-0 entering the 7th, but the Too-Soons finally show some weakness. Josh Gibson leads the inning off with a walk, and he advances to second on this wild pitch, and then makes it to third as an error from Jackie Robinson fails to retire Pat Patterson. And finally, the Crawfords get on the board with a single from Bill Perkins, but that will be all. Koufax would see one additional batter in the 8th, but then comes out, so it's another stellar postseason performance for Sandy. For quite a while, he held the record for most consecutive batters retired via a strikeout in a World Series game, a mark he set in 1963. He remained in sole possession of that record until just this past World Series as Houston's Framber Valdez tied it in Game 6. Next time you're at a rave, try this piece of trivia out and you will blow the roof clean off the place. Just like Nomar Garciaparra blows the door right off this game with a 3-run home run here in the 8th. And if you still had any doubts, Tony Conigliaro erases them. Like the donkey I stole but forgot to lock behind an electric fence, that ball is leaving the yard. It's 7-1 Tucson, and here's Rick Ankiel closing this one out. He gets 5 outs in this one without surrendering a hit, which just adds to his spotless tournament. Here's a quick rundown of his appearances. Ankiel continues to be the redemption story of this season of second chances. So let's wrap this one up. The Too-Soons fire the first shot in the series, and it was close until it wasn't. Koufax and Matlock were excellent, but the Pittsburgh bullpen just couldn't close it out. Tucson did it with the home run as Josh Hamilton, Nomar Garciaparra, and Tony Conigliaro all go yard en route to the 7-1 victory. It's a harbinger for doom if you drop both of the games in your home park to start a playoff series, and it doesn't take much before we launch straight into some drama. Roosevelt Davis hits Jackie Robinson here in the top of the first with 2 outs. This is a matchup we haven't had the opportunity to talk about yet. The Negro Leagues and Jackie Robinson are both extremely important tentpoles in the story of baseball segregation and reintegration, but it doesn't seem like they always saw eye to eye. Jackie wasn't the best player in the Negro Leagues, and in fact, he didn't really spend much time there, nor did he really like it. The Kansas City Monarchs of the Negro Leagues offered him a contract in 1945, even though at that point, he was likely more well known for his exploits in football rather than baseball. In fact, he only played a single season of baseball at UCLA, hitting .097, which is part of what makes what happened when he hit the majors so unbelievable. But going to the Negro Leagues seemed like the best move after his bullshit discharge from the military that we discussed in the Too-Soons reveal video. He played well for Kansas City, hitting .387 with 5 home runs in 47 games, but he wasn't crazy about the experience. Gambling was rampant in the league, it had a hectic traveling schedule which took time away from his new marriage, and it was disorganized. He was only there for a single season, and before the end of the year, he had entered into an agreement with Branch Rickey to come over to the Brooklyn Dodgers system the following year. The agreement, however, was more based on Jackie's ability to handle himself in the face of racial tensions rather than the fact he was the most promising player in the Negro Leagues. Now, Jackie, despite a lack of a reliable baseball track record, ended up being incredible, but many thought pitcher Satchel Paige or Josh Gibson, who are both on these Crawfords, deserved to be the first. Satchel wouldn't make it to the major leagues until 1948 when he was 42 years old. Gibson would be dead before Jackie even made his debut. Those that knew him theorized he died so young because of a broken heart from not being called up. Modern medicine seems to point to a brain tumor and a stroke, but I'm no doctor. I just simulate games and make dick jokes on YouTube. Anyhow, that hit by pitch doesn't amount to anything, but it is an intriguing event in the early stages of this series to keep an eye on. Here's another play that doesn't really result in anything, but it's notable because this is Mark Fidrich's first career hit. Prior to the experimental baseball tournament, he never had a single at-bat. You're welcome. We've got something brewing here in the fourth. Thurman Munson leads off the inning with a first pitch single, but is immediately erased by a Roosevelt Davis pickoff. And this may have ended up being big because both Dave Nielsen and Freddie Sanchez would single later in the inning, which may have scored him. Instead, it's up to Mark Fidrich to see if he can manage career hit number 2, but unfortunately, we can't make that happen for him. Now it's Pittsburgh with the chance. Oscar Charleston leads the inning off with a double and advances to third on a ground out to the shortstop. Bill Perkins gets the ball up in the air, but Oscar Charleston decides not to test the arm of center fielder Kurt Flood. And then Ted Bond is hit by a pitch that loads the bases with 2 outs, so this is a big at-bat for Sam Bankhead. But that is an unassisted ground out to first base. What do you say we stop beating around the bush? With Canigliaro on first base, this is Jackie Robinson providing a receipt for that hit by pitch earlier. It's 2-0 Tucson. And then later in the 7th, we're still sitting at 2-0, but Josh Hamilton extends the lead with a 2-run home run of his own, as he homers in the first 2 games of the series. The top of the 8th still finds Pittsburgh sitting at 0, but Tucson keeps adding on. A double by Nomar Garcia-Parra is followed by a Freddie Sanchez double, and now it's 5-0. In the bottom of the 8th, the Crawfords finally get on the board, but they do it without the benefit of a hit. Chester Williams ends up reaching here on an error and makes it over to second, and then later that inning, Rap Dixon later scores him with a sac fly. That prompts the Tucsons to take Fidrich out of the game and bring in Darryl Kyle in relief. That was one of the best outings we've seen all tournament long. That Oscar Charleston double in the 4th inning was the last hit he gave up. Mark the Bird Fidrich got off to a rough start in the group stage, but today he goes 7 2/3 while only allowing 2 hits. You might say, we flipped the bird. It's possible the other team doesn't know how to react to his eccentricities. Fidrich was known for talking to the balls before he pitched him, and one of my favorite responses to that came from Greg Nettles. Fidrich had started his whole ball conversation routine, and Greg immediately jumped out of the batter's box and started talking to his bat. He reportedly said, "Never mind what he says to the ball, you just hit it over the outfield fence." Well, Nettles struck out. "Damn," he said, "Japanese bat doesn't understand a word of English." Nettles actually hit Fidrich pretty well in his career, though, with a .389 average and 2 home runs, so it's possible he later acquired some English-speaking bats, or at the very least, perhaps they were bilingual. Fidrich finds himself on the Tucsons because he blew his arm out and kinda disappeared after that. He wasn't the type to join the broadcast booth. In fact, the one time he tried to, due to being out with an injury, Al Michaels tried to set him up for a conversation about Richie Hebner. Mark's contribution to the conversation was, "Who's Richie Hebner?" Back into the game, Darryl Kyle is able to go the rest of the way without incident, as we'll show the final out here, retiring Sam Bankhead on a fielder's choice. And so Pittsburgh is going to have to work its way back from an 0-2 deficit as they now go on the road for 3 games against the Tucsons. Aside from Mark Fidrich's fantastic performance, the Tucsons rode home runs by Josh Hamilton and Jackie Robinson to victory. That does it for these games. Let's see what we've got coming up for next time. We'll be kicking off the series between the Diamonds and the Rough and Club Snub as we start at the Snub's home park for the first 2. Game 1 will feature the Diamonds' Felix Hernandez taking on Brett Saberhagen, while in Game 2 we'll see Diamond and the Rough's Fergie Jenkins taking on the Snub's Bert Blyleven. As always, drop your predictions of who will win in the comments and by what margin for your chance at a prize at the end of the season. If you enjoy what we're doing here, a subscription to the channel, thumbs up on the video, and starting a discussion in the comments are the quickest way to making the Dugs a thing, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Coming up next on the Doug Sports Network, the Skee Ball Championships. The best skee ball players from around the country are battling it out to see who can ski their balls the best. Winner gets their choice between this plastic army man or this piece of double bubble gum from 1995. We'll see you next time on the Dugs. I've been Johnny Paprika, hoping all of your balls are fair and all of your wood is good. Good night, everybody.